Thor: Love and Thunder debuted last summer, making Thor the first and thus far only Marvel character to get 4 MCU movies all to himself. And after Taika Waititi's surprisingly awesome Thor: Ragnarok, a lot of people were looking forward to this one. But boy was it divisive! YouTube reviewers called it everything from perfectly mediocre to hot garbage, with a little platoon claiming this film hates you. But anyone can criticize and complain, it takes a script monk to tell you how to fix it. So I'm going to put this big lunk on the table for a post-mortem and teach you a few things about screencraft along the way. So let's examine the patient. Examination! To be honest, I wouldn't call Thor: Love and Thunder a bad movie. If you want to talk bad, the MCU's done far worse. Really, Thor: Love and Thunder has a lot of fun moments. And that's the thing, there's a little too much fun being had here. With all the witty banter and the yuckity yucks and the goofy sight gags and the Lisa Frank Trapper Keeper rainbow horsery. But when it comes to the story, everything just kind of comes off hollow. You know, Kevin Smith is a notorious comic book fan who's never gotten a chance to make a superhero film. But if you took a Kevin Smith film and turned it into a superhero film, you'd have Thor: Love and Thunder. Because every scene is just jokey, ironic banter, more jokey banter, once in a while plot point, then right back to the jokey, ironic banter. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Taika Waititi's take on the Thor character. You have to approach Thor with a certain level of irony, or else he comes off as a pompous ass. But there's so much pointless goofery in this movie, I'm surprised Thor doesn't close the quick stop to play hockey on the roof.
Don't pass to this guy, he sucks. You suck.
You know how some people use humor to stay emotionally distant and avoid talking about anything serious? That's the tone of this entire movie. The movie actually starts off strong with a really well done cold open, establishing a sympathetic villain with surprisingly human motivations. Gore the God Butcher has a lot of potential. Too bad the rest of the movie doesn't do much to follow up on it. Then we get a wacky, fun battle sequence with the Guardians. That's all fine and good. But then comes the story's inciting incident. They just look at a big computer screen and say, "Hey, look at all these murdered gods. Who could have done all this?" I'm not paraphrasing. That's pretty much the actual dialogue.
Look at all of these gods murdered.
The horror. Who could have done something like this?
That's right, the movie's inciting incident is a single piece of expositional dialogue. That's your first clue that plot will not be this movie's strong point. So Thor recognizes one of these victims as his friend Lady Sif, who I guess was in the first Thor movie. I didn't remember her at the time, but whatever. So Thor goes to Lady Sif, and her entire story purpose is just to tell Thor, "Hey, thanks for coming over here. The bad guy's now going to Asgard, so you should go over there now." Here's the biggest problem with the plot in this movie. The whole thing develops like a video game where you have to talk to the right NPC to figure out what to do next. So instead of a story in constant development through characters pursuing wants and needs, we have a series of static situations, occasionally punctuated by new information. And this is a direct result of Thor's biggest issue as a character. Thor is completely reactive instead of proactive. This means that instead of being the active force of change in the story, Thor simply responds to whatever's happening around him, like a big dog sitting in a yard waiting for someone to bark at. I mean, the movie literally begins with Thor just sitting on a rock waiting for someone to tell him to join a fight. He's unable to think for himself and always needs someone to tell him, "Go here, do this." Anywho, Thor returns to New Asgard just as Gore is attacking the city. For what reason? Unclear, just go with it. And as it turns out, Jane Foster is there as the new Lady Thor. Why? Unclear, just go with it. Then Gore steals a bunch of children and disappears. Why? Unclear, just go with it. In fact, the movie never explains why Gore abducts all these children or what he plans to do with them. I've heard some say he does this just to bait Thor, but then who the heck are all these other kids? Why are some of them weird aliens? Are these kids from loser worlds whose gods no-showed on them? I mean, how sad would that be? Actually, I know exactly why Gore kidnaps the children. It's a cheap plot device. The story needs something for Thor Dog to chase after, and kidnapped children is the easiest, most low-effort solution.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
But geez, at least come up with a reason for it. By the way, can anyone tell me if the scene where Gore throws the eel head at the kids is a direct reference to that Krusty the Clown meme with the ventriloquist dummy? Because that would be hilarious. Anywho, around this point we get the start of the movie's second major story thread, that between Thor and his old girlfriend Caitlin Bree. I mean, Jane Foster. Thor's still hung up on Jane, but things are weird because Jane is somehow doing Thor's old job and using Thor's old hammer, which Thor has some sort of weird fetish thing going on with. By the way, this is not relatable. I mean, who's ever had their ex steal their identity? This is more like some Freudian sexual body snatcher fear. But anyway, Thor's reunion with Jane after 9 years has a lot of potential for emotional character growth. Too bad everything is cold, stiff, and awkward between them because it's all sterilized by a bunch of yuckity-yuck fun-time jokey jokes. You know, I've been making a lot of Clerks references, but the character arcs in Clerks are like Tolstoy compared to anything in Thor. But the biggest problem is that there is no connection between the Thor and Jane thread and the main villain conflict. No plot connection, no theme connection. So, whenever we're dealing with Thor and Jane, it feels like we're just stealing time away from the real story, watching Thor derp around with his ex while the kids are getting creeped on by Ashy Larry. Alright, back to the plot. Things advance by a few more NPC encounters until Thor gets the idea to head on over to God City, where it turns out there are hundreds of gods and they all like to hang out in the same place, like it's the Citadel of Rix or something. Now this is clearly the Phantom Menace pod racing sequence of this movie. That one big set piece the entire script was written around. And it really is a fun, visually spectacular sequence. But nothing comes of it. It's entirely pointless. Okay, I guess they get Zeus's lightning bolt, but so what? It's just another weapon. It doesn't alter the story in any way. Oh, never mind, they get it for plot convenience later. Oh no, Thor lost his axe, he can't travel in space anymore. No, wait, the lightning bolt can do it too. How convenient. As for the rest of the plot, you know how it goes. Late Act 2B confrontation with the villain. Oh no, it's a trap. Oh, the all is lost moment. Grr, I'm all motivated now. Big Act 3 CGI battle. I mean, it's action movie template 1A. Really, I couldn't muster much interest in the big climax. Why? I'll tell you in the diagnosis. Problem 1. What are the stakes here? Stakes explain to the audience why they should care about the situation. So why should we care about what happens in Thor Love and Thunder? Okay, Gore is trying to kill all the gods in the universe. Now that sounds really epic, but would it really be all that bad if that happened? Seriously, the movie goes out of its way to depict all the gods as a bunch of lazy, useless jerks who don't give a rat's ass about humanity. So what's really the worst thing that would happen if all the gods suddenly disappeared? Seriously, movie, tell me. If you want us to care, we need to know. Okay, Thor is a god. Thor will die. Those are some stakes. But you'd hardly realize it from watching this movie. We are given nothing to convince us that Thor is in any kind of real danger. Thor himself doesn't even seem to realize this. It's just another day at the office for him. So if Thor himself isn't worried about the stakes, why should we care about them? Problem 2. What is the theme here? Theme is the magic that holds a story together. It's what unifies all elements into a meaningful whole and gives a story a sense of value and purpose. If a movie's not about something, it's about nothing. Now, at the start of Love and Thunder, I had a lot of hope. I thought, oh cool, we got all these ancient gods, we got Korg acting as storyteller, we're going to get a self-aware tale about myth and the power of story to instill belief. But then all that went away. So what are we left with? I don't know. They try to tack on something at the end about the power of love. Yeah, real original. But where was that in the 90% of the movie that preceded it? I said how there's no connection between the main conflict and the Thor and Jane thread. But that pretty much goes for all of Love and Thunder's story elements. What is the common denominator that brings everything together? That's the work of theme, and that's what's missing here. Problem 3. The problem with the plot isn't just that Thor is reactive. A reactive hero can still work if they're surrounded by allies who are proactive. But all of Love and Thunder's heroes are reactive. Thor, Jane, Valkyrie, Korg. They all spend their time just standing around cracking jokes, waiting to be told what to do next. I have a note here that just says space cops, because that's how they act. They just respond to a case laid out for them with about as much personal attachment as Ice-T in an episode of Law & Order. When your most proactive character is the villain, your movie's got some problems. But again, it's one thing to point out problems, that's another thing to fix them. And I can turn around this banana boat with 3 simple changes. The remedy! Fix number 1. The proper theme of this movie is staring us right in the face. It's just that someone failed to connect all the dots. If Gore achieves his goal, if he's not stopped in time, Thor will drop dead, never to return, right? So, in other words, we have an immortal being who for the first time in his existence must face the real and honest fear of his own mortality. Wow! What a potentially rich and dramatic concept! A god brought down to our level to face the inevitability of death. There's Thor's motivation. He's literally fighting to remain alive. Oh, and guess what? Jane currently is fighting to remain alive. Jane has stage 4 cancer. Gee, what a great parallel to create emotional depth between her and Thor. What great common ground to be the site of their reconciliation. And this theme would not only connect Thor to Jane, but to Gorr as well. The whole catalyst for Gorr's genocidal quest was that his daughter died, only to be callously told there's no eternity where he might hope to see her again. In other words, the theme is, how do we deal with our fear that death is the end? Oh, and by the way, our questions about death and eternity are the whole reason all the mythical gods were invented in the first place! I mean, come on, people! It was all right there! Fix number 2. We can't really do much about Thor's reactivity. It's in the nature of his character, but that can be dealt with. Tim Burton's Batman was also a reactive hero. But what did Burton do? He let the villain take the lead. The first half of 1989's Batman has far more Joker than Bruce Wayne. It's really the Joker's story. That way, we got a swiftly developing story with a proactive lead instead of watching Bruce Wayne brood in the dark waiting for something to happen. The same thing should have happened in Thor: Love and Thunder. We're given a villain with so much potential. Gorr is a man corrupted by tragedy, driven to do evil things for sympathetic reasons. But Gorr only appears 5 times in the entire story. Gorr should have been allowed to take the lead. At least 50% of the film's first half should have been dedicated to exploring Gorr's character and establishing his goal and his plan to achieve it. Which, by the way, would orientate the audience to where the story is going in order to create anticipation and suspense. And for God's sakes, give a reason why Gorr kidnaps the children. Fix number 3. This isn't the Three Stooges, okay? Comedy has its time and place, and that time and place isn't everywhere. Comedy distances. It's antithetical to emotion. And probably the biggest complaint about this movie is its lack of passion. Thor is supposedly suffering from his heartbreak. Jane is facing the fear of death. But all this potential emotion is dulled and deadened by comedy that doesn't know its place. And the worst crime is that if the characters had been allowed to show some passion, the proper theme and stakes might have risen to the surface. So stop being the wry, sardonic space police and become emotionally involved. So those are my notes. I guess Kevin Feige, take those and come back to me with another draft. Or, oh, right. Movies don't get second drafts. You gotta get it right the first time. Anyway, if you're a writer, I hope you learned something from Thor: Love and Thunder's mistakes. I always say you can learn just as much from bad movies as you can good ones. I plan to do more of these movie fix videos in the future along with my regular content, so please like and subscribe if you want to see more cinematic dismantling. Next on the chopping block is... Oh no. Until then, I'm a script monk. I'll see you later. Why would I want to do that to myself?